Good afternoon, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Exodus. We're now in chapter 13. Chapter 13 follows from our lengthy explanation of chapter 12, which speaks about the Pesach and all the rules regarding Pesach or the Passover. When we come to chapter 13, they still have not left yet, and these are the continued laws and commands that God is making to the Israelites. We always think that the Passover, the meal, the slaughter, the unleavened bread, all of that are the only things that were spoken, but it's not true. So in chapter 13, we come to a point where we discover a lot of other things. Now, it's important for us to realize that this is a continuation, and this would be an and then, a new segment that God is speaking. So, and Jehovah spoke to Moses, saying, and then he says these words: consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever opens the womb among the children of Israel, of man and beast. It is mine. We need to take a pause here to remember that we are reading this at the beginning of the Exodus. Right before they left Egypt, these words were given to them. Let me explain. The first word here is consecrate, a very big English word. Basically, it says make holy. It also means to make special, make them different. Remember, the word holy is special, it's different, and sometimes we say set apart. Now, set apart is actually to make different. So if you have everything that looks the same, and so you take this piece and you put it aside, well, this piece here is holy, set apart, because it is now different from the rest. It is put aside. And that is what this word actually means. To consecrate means to make holy, set apart, make different. You may have a lot of children, but these are the ones that God wants. Set apart for me all the firstborn. Now, you know, firstborn, the word here is bakor. Bakor is firstborn, but more importantly, firstborn have two meanings. Let me explain. The firstborn could be one to the father or the mother. What difference does it mean? The father could have many wives, and each mother could have a firstborn. So the first of the children born to the father is called the firstborn of the father. But when it comes to the woman, the firstborn of the mother is called the first issue of the womb. So please bear in mind, firstborn has these connotations. For the father, the first child that he has, male child. For the mother, the first male child that she gives birth to. And so here in chapter 13, to be clear, you find that it is this word here, pater, is whatever opens the womb. And this is the first of the womb. Among the children of Israel, both man and beast, the behemoth, the beast that they own, it is mine. Now, this is where I want us to pay attention. At this point in time, there is a contrast of firstborn. the 10th plague that came upon the land of Egypt was that all the firstborn, both man and animal, died in Egypt when there was no blood on the doorposts and the lintel, the top bar. If they never sacrifice the Pesach, and then firstborns die. Here in chapter 13, God says, all of the sons of Israel, I want your firstborn of children, of man, of humans, and beasts. This is a contrast of firstborn. One has to die, and from the Israelites, they are to be dedicated to God. This is what it means. It is for God's use. At this point in time, the firstborn are the ones to be assigned to serve God. Now, of course, now that we have read so many things in the book of Leviticus, in the rest of the Tanakh, in the Hebrew Bible, you find that we have the Levites. And this is found in Numbers chapter 3. And so remember, Exodus 13 is before Numbers chapter 3. In Numbers chapter 3, God allowed all the firstborn to be redeemed. And God set apart in their place the Levites. And the reason we shall read somewhere in the later part of the book of Exodus at Mount Sinai at the issue of the golden calf. For now, just bear in mind there is no contradiction. In Numbers chapter 3, God made a change because at Mount Sinai, the Levites stood by Moses while the rest went to serve the golden calf. And hence, God allowed the firstborn to be redeemed and to set apart the tribe of Levi. At this juncture, in Exodus chapter 13, we are reading the original intent of God to use the firstborn to serve him. That is what you need to bear in mind at this point in time. In Egypt, the firstborn died. Now God wants the firstborn of Israel to serve him. We continue to look at the description of what God is reminding them before they left Egypt. In verse 3, and then another portion, and then Moses said to the people, he says, remember this day in which you went out of Egypt, the Pesach, the feast of the Passover, and the unleavened bread is to be remembered by the Israelites, because in which you went out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Now, we always keep talking about the house of bondage. The literal meaning here is the house of servanthood. The house of servanthood means that they were in a house of Egypt where they were to serve the masters. It says here, for by the strength of the hand of the Lord Jehovah brought you out of this place. The strength literally here would be chodzek. It is the might, right? The power or the might of the hand of God. And in this case, you find that no leaven, bread shall be eaten. See, this idea of strength of the hand of God to bring you out of this place is that God's right hand that did all the miracles called the plagues forced the hand of Pharaoh to send the sons of Israel out of the place. It is by the show of power, show of might, and that is God's power and God's might. It is not by human might. And this is something which they are to remember. When they are leaving Egypt, it is by the mighty hand of Jehovah who brought you out of this place. And so no leavened bread shall be eaten. True that it is a time where they are in a hurry and the leaven doesn't allow enough time to rise the bread. But in another aspect, it is to tell us that this is the power of God and it is not the power of man. A leaven is a power that man uses to raise the bread. It's symbolic. And so matzah, unleavened, is to remember that it is God's power and none of human power. On this day, you are going out in the month of Aviv. The month of Aviv is pronounced as Aviv, is the month of spring. Many of us may not realize that the Hebrew calendar is a 29, 30-day month calendar. And every year, they will lose about 11 to 12 days from a solar system of calculation. If you're not careful, over a couple of years, the month of Aviv will no longer be spring. And so God says, remember this day. And this day is Aviv in spring on the 15th of the month. If the year calculation is not recalibrated, then you would find that you will not have Aviv in a couple of years' time. When you celebrate the Passover, it's not on the same day. And so the Hebrew people, when they found that there is a shortfall of timing when compared to the solar day, had inserted every few years a 12th month of Adar. The month of Adar is the 12th month. Right now, we are in the 12th month. It is called Adar 1. So we have Adar 1 and Adar 2. This year, we are going to have an Adar 1 right now, and then an Adar 2, because the Adar 1 is going to end sometime this month, but it is not spring yet. And so what's going to happen is this year, we are going to have 12 months. Very similar to how the Chinese calendar does this compensation of time. And so in the Hebrew calendar, this year there is an insertion of an intercalary month, and Adar 2, so that in April, late April, we will have the Aviv, a correct time of the Aviv. And so it is important then, if they are Jews, they are Israelites, they must make sure that the remembrance of this day, the 15th of Aviv, doesn't move in its time of the year. This is how serious they are. And it shall be, when Jehovah brings you into the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Now notice there are 5 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the book of Genesis, we have 7. The Perizzites and the Girgashites. They are not recorded here. Possibly they are not that important. Now, according to the Jewish exposition, the reason why the Girgashites and the Perizzites are not mentioned, although they are included in the book of Genesis, is because of the next line. Jehovah swore to your fathers to give you a land flowing with milk and honey. A land flowing with milk and honey. That shall keep you this service in this month. And so that's how you shall keep this service. Now, this land that's flowing with milk and honey comes from the land that they will take from the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Hivites, and Jebusites. In Exodus chapter 3, there is also a land that is called vast and broad, which does not tell us that they are very fertile. Now, that's how the Jewish interpreters would look at this, that the land of the Girgashites and the Perizzites are just broad spaces for them to dwell, but not the fertile land flowing with milk and honey, such that the produce from these lands flowing with milk and honey would be the ones that's brought to the temple for the temple service. No matter how, when we look at this, we are reminded that the land that God is going to bring them, that God swore to your fathers, meaning God made a promise to Abraham, then to Isaac, and to Jacob, and he is now honoring that word. That is what faithfulness of God actually means. He made a promise, and he's going to keep the promise, except that in these 430 years later, and we know that it will be another 38 years more, because by the time they get to Numbers chapter 13 and 14, the first generation of the Israelites that we read in chapter 12 refused to go in. And so they wandered in the wilderness for another 38 years. God swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and there was only a delay of time because of the disobedience of the people. Now, the reminder to them is very simple. 7 days you eat matzah. And on the 7th day, there will be a feast to the Lord. There is a celebration. Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days. And no leavened bread shall be seen among you, nor shall leaven be seen among you in all your quarters, meaning where you live, no leaven, which is to say that on the 13th day, they are to start cleaning up the place. And you shall tell your son in that day, and this is important. This is what we call tradition. This is oral tradition. If the children ask, what happened? Then tell them this, that this is done. The reason why we eat unleavened bread is because of what the Lord did, what Jehovah did for me when I came up from Egypt. The word up is important because Egypt is down. They are lower in the terrain. When you leave Egypt, you go up. It shall be as a sign to you on your hand. So you must mark something on your hand, and as a memorial between your eyes. Now, verse 9 is to tell you that the thing that is between your eyes is a remembrance. This idea of a remembrance, a memorial, or a reminder comes from the word zikron. This is very much what we would call uh, I guess we can call it a tefillin. That little that little box that you put on in between your eyes, and there is something that you tie on your hand, and according to Jewish tradition, on your left hand. And why left hand? Is because it is the hand that is closer to the heart, and it is as a reminder to remember, and something that you tie around your head between your eyes, that the Jehovah's Torah may be in your mouth. For with a mighty hand of Jehovah, he has brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep this ordinance as a law in its season from year to year. Now, verse 10, when it says season from year to year, I think we should make sure that we are clear of this word. This word doesn't mean season in its appointed time. God made appointments. What is an appointment? That you meet God at an appointed time. So you must keep this ordinance as a law, as a statute. Just do it. Don't ask questions. Eat unleavened bread for 7 days. And of course, there's a Passover in chapter 12. All this must be kept because they are to remember this day when you left Egypt at a house out of the house of servanthood. You see, this is a very strict law to the Israelites because it is for them to remember what God has done by his mighty hand. The mighty hand. Again, I reminded everyone, no unleavened bread is that yeast gives us a sense of strength added to the flour to rise the flour. There is a strength and might that man can do. In the entire 10 plagues where God forced the hand of Pharaoh, nothing man could do. It was everything that God did. That's the whole issue about eating matzah. And they are to do this as a law. Verse 11. And it shall be when the Lord brings you into the land, when you're in the land of the Canaanites. Now, there is only one word here, Canaanites, not all the nations. In general, all the nations that were mentioned are all descendants of Canaan, including the Canaanites. And this is a representative word for the land of Canaan, and so the Canaanites, as he swore to you and your fathers, and gives it to you. This is fulfillment. The faithfulness of God is to see to the fact that his promise, as promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is actually fulfilled. Fulfilled means there will come a time when they will actually come back to the land and own the land by fighting for it. That you shall, in verse 12, again, set apart to the Lord all that open the womb, that is every firstborn that comes from an animal which you have. Now, let me just mention this. This word set apart, although it was used in verse 1 and 2, it does not appear here. The word here literally means to cause to pass up. Cause to pass up. Cause to put aside. That's a different word. This is not the make holy concept, but it is to say, if you've got a whole bunch of it, just put them aside. And that is what it means in the English, set apart. All that open the womb, this is the idea of a first issue. The first life that comes out of a womb, it is God. Every firstborn here is with regard to the first issue, right? It's the first issue, the first that comes out of the womb. And so all that opens the womb, every firstborn, which is first issue, meaning the mother's firstborn, that comes from man and animal. And here, to be more specific, it is not just any animal, the males belongs to God. Now, remember, God wants the men to serve God. And so God wants the firstborn, who are males, to belong to him. In verse 13, he says, "But every firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb." You can take back the donkey by giving a lamb. Why? Because the donkey is an unclean animal. And God says, well, we're not going to use the donkey for rituals. And if you will not redeem it, then you shall break its neck. And all the firstborn of man. Now, firstborn of man is the core. Among your sons you shall redeem. So it shall be when your son asks you in time to come, say, "What is this?" that you shall say to him, "By strength, or by the might of the hand of God, brought us out of Egypt, out of the house of servanthood. And it came to pass, when Pharaoh was stubborn about letting us go, that Jehovah killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beasts." This is the 10th plague. Once you understand this, then you find that therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all males that open the womb. Remember, this is first issue of the womb. Not the firstborn of a father, but the firstborn of the mother. And all the firstborns of my sons I redeem. It shall be as a sign on your hand and as frontlets, appendages between your eyes, for by the might of the hand of God brought us out of Egypt. Now, this word here is totafot. Frontlets is totafot. Very similar to tefillin, the phylacteries. It looks something like that. You tie something around your head, and there is the idea of a box, and it is tied in the front part between your eyes. The Jewish people believe that this is the basis of the instructions for anyone who is a religious Jewish man, to do this as a symbol to remember what God has instructed. Now, here it says, all the males shall belong to God, to Jehovah, and all the firstborn of my sons I redeem. God redeemed all the males by introducing the 10th plague into Egypt. All the firstborn of Egypt died because they didn't have the blood on the doorposts. And then the idea of redeem is important. The idea of redeem is pada. It is redeem. And to give you a better picture of pada, it literally means to bring back to an original state. God wants the firstborn to belong to him, and he took them back by giving up on the firstborn of the Egyptians. See, the word redeem here is an English word, and we think of redemption like pawning, right? You pawn something and then you pay money and you take it back. That is not how it means. The word here, redeem, is to take back for God's use. So that's what he means. I took back for my use, to set apart all of them so that they will serve God. God's intent at this point in time is for all the firstborn to serve him. But then later it was switched over to the Levites. And then all the firstborn, the parents can redeem them by paying a redemption sum. And then they could actually take all their firstborn back to the family. And so all of that is an idea of redemption, to take them back to where it was supposed to be. That is the idea of padar, of redeem. Please do not have that English notion of redeeming something that you have pawned. Verse 17. Then, well, this is and then, as you can tell. And then it came to pass, when Pharaoh had let the people go, which was uh, on the 14th of Nisan, that God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. Now, bear in mind, let me just draw you that little map. Now, the people were in Goshen, and they are to enter into the promised land, which is up here. The land of the Philistines are not given to the Israelites, not the entire part. A certain portion of it really remained with the Philistines. And the Philistines would be the occupants of Gaza. But the rest of the area, like Ashkelon, Akron, they've been taken over by the Israelites eventually, but not Gaza. And so this way to the promised land would have been the shorter way. And this is called the way of the land of the Philistines. Number one. Why was it a problem? And God says, because God says, lest the people change their minds when they see war. What do you mean when they see war? If the Israelites, when they left the land, they were all armed, but they are not soldiers. And if they have to fight the hardcore Philistines, they will have a hard time. The Philistines will not allow them to just cross over their land without a fight. Although they are not about to take over their land, but still, that would be not something that the Israelites would be ready for. And so God says that may be true, but in the event they were to go into a major fight, they will want to go back to where they came from and return to Egypt. And that won't do. So God led the people around by the way of the wilderness of the Red Sea. Now, remember, Red Sea is Yam Suf. The idea of Red Sea, in my estimation, would be across this is the Red Sea. And they would have to go all the way across. And they would wander here in the wilderness, in the northern Arabian Peninsula. When they are over to the other side, then they have the Amalekites. But it was too late. They have crossed Yam Suf and they can't go back. The idea here is that God is making arrangements such that if there were times where they complain and they want to go back to Egypt, they can't. If they took the way of the land of the Philistines, they could. It's easy, it's short, and one complaint, and all of them would go back to Egypt. But if they had crossed Yam Suf, or the Red Sea, to the other side of the Arabian Peninsula, in that wilderness area, they can't just go home or go back to Egypt. And that is the idea. And so it says here, and the children of Israel went up in orderly ranks out of the land of Egypt. Now, this word out of Egypt in orderly ranks is something that we need to retranslate. The word here for orderly ranks actually means to be armed. They were the army of God. In verse 18, they are called the array. The array here means chamushim. Chamushim is an array, a battle array. So not orderly ranks that they are marching nicely. This is in battle array. It means that they were properly armed. So it is not an orderly rank in that sense, right? They're not marching nicely. They are in a battle array, dressed up, all ready to fight out of the land of Egypt. And that would be something which is not well translated in this case. Verse 19, and this would be, and then Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had placed the children of Israel under solemn oath. This idea of solemn oath is that they have sworn by the name of God. And when you swear by the name of God, a formal oath, you must do, else you die. And he had apparently said this: God will surely visit you. Now, the idea of visit you is to pakat. And you see this word, and God will visit you in the third and fourth generation in Exodus 20, in the Ten Commandments. Same word. The word visit is quite interesting. The word visit carries a positive and a negative meaning. The positive meaning is to visit by way uh, of bringing good things. And here, redemption. In the negative way, the visit is about punishment. And so in Exodus chapter 20, you find that when God says he will visit you in the third and fourth generation, it's about punishment. Same word. And so in the more neutral text, it would be saying God will visit you. And so we need to understand in context. In this case, it is positive. It is a good thing, right? It's a good thing. It's a redemption. And you shall carry my bones from here with you and bring me back to the promised land. Verse 20. Verse 20 says this: so is, and then they took their journey Now, this word took their journey is a very interesting word. There's no such word in Hebrew. It's actually pulled out. And pulled out here literally means pull out the tent pegs. Now, if you are encamped and you've got 10 pegs and you are pulling out your 10 pegs, it means that you're packing up to go. And that is the meaning. So the translation in English, it says, took their journey. But literally, it's, and then they pulled out their 10 pegs from Sukkot and encamped at Etam, at the edge of the wilderness. Verse 21 is something which we all should pay attention to. Verse 21 and 22. It says, Jehovah went before them, and this means Jehovah walked to their faces. What does that mean? It means this. If they are all lined up to leave and they are facing this way, so God would be facing them and it would be in their front, not in the back. That's how literally it could be read. By day in a pillar of cloud to lead the way, and that will tell us that by way in the morning, in the daytime, we have a pillar of cloud. Now, this word pillar is amud. Pillar comes from the word amad. So let me just explain this to you. It's quite an interesting Hebrew phrase. Pillar is amud. It comes from the word amad. Amad is to stand upright. And so when we talk about a pillar of cloud, it is an upright pillar. That's what it means, an upright pillar of cloud. And that is by day. And by night in a pillar of fire. So in front, where they can see the cloud, they know where to go. By night, then it becomes a pillar of fire. And what it probably looks like is like that. It is a pillar of fire and it's long and tall, but it moves. And in this case, you find that this pillar is to give them light. For both day in the daytime where it's bright and nighttime where there's no light, God gave them a light in front so as to walk by day and night. It means that they can travel day and night. In the typical scenario, when the sun sets, nobody travels. They always have to find a place to rest and be safe and be protected. In this case, when you have the pillar of cloud, in this case, right? And then you have a pillar of fire. God is constantly showing them the way and constantly giving them directions, giving them light to see where they are going. And most importantly, now we read, He did not take away the pillar of cloud by day or the pillar of fire by night before the people. or to the face of the people. It's always to the faces. It's in front of them. God did not take away. Now, this idea of take away means remove, did not remove. This is to let us know that as God is taking them out with a strong and mighty arm to crush Pharaoh, to let them go, to show them that it is only God's power that took them out, and so they need to eat matzah, unleavened bread, to remember nothing that they did contributed to the Exodus. God not only forced the issue with Pharaoh to get them out, to redeem them, it is to take them all the way into the promised land. That is how faithful God is. He not only made the promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then to these people, but to make sure that they actually inherit the land, to fight and possess the land. And so this is the beginning of God fulfilling his words. 430 years down the road from Abraham, and they are leaving Egypt. These instructions in chapter 13 is clear. If the children ask them, tell them this is what God did. The whole Pesach, the whole Passover, the entire Seder that they do today is to remind their children what God did on that night and that day when they left Egypt. It is all about God's mighty hand. That picture of God's mighty hand is the reason why they are able to leave. And the ritual that they do in the eating of the unleavened bread for 7 days, the Passover meal that they are to remember by, all of them called the Pesach, is to give thanks and glory to Jehovah, because it was his strong and mighty hand that allowed them to leave. And at the end of chapter 13, describe to us that he is not going to leave them and let them go. He is going to be with them to give them guidance and to be always in front of them. And so at the end of chapter 13, they are leaving. From verse 20, they pulled out their tent pegs from Sukkot and they started to leave the place. Where do they go? Because the wilderness does not have any direction signposts. If they had gone by the way of the land of the Philistines, they would be by the coastal area and they would know how to follow the coastline back to Egypt had they made any trouble. But if they go into the wilderness, then everywhere looks alike. And because of the fact they are into the wilderness, it requires direction and light to walk. And that is where, without saying very much in the text, God is leading the way through the wilderness to show them where to go, because they have no idea what to do, where to turn, and only God did. And this is to show them that the strong and mighty hand of God is with them even in the wilderness. And this is the beginning of that narrative. So with this, we come to the end of our chapter 13.